My next guest was asked to leave her role at Queensland Children's Hospital after expressing concerns about the so-called affirmation model the hospital has adopted, a model she was forced to subscribe to. Dr. Gillian Spencer is a senior child and adolescent psychiatrist who's been a leading voice calling out the dangers of children medically transitioning. She recently featured in the Spotlight documentary, Detransitioning. Take a look.
Do you think the hospital want to sack you?
Yes. Yes, they do.
They want you off the books?
They don't want me hanging around in the hospital.
Because as far as they're concerned, you're a troublemaker.
I guess the problem with having me in the hospital is that I become a rallying point around the issue, and it might motivate other people to raise similar concerns.
Dr. Spencer joins me now. Thank you so much for coming in. Tell me about when you were first asked to implement this gender affirmation model and why it alarms you, why you're not a supporter of it.
The gender clinic became operational in my hospital in 2017, and so in the years following that I saw an increasing number of traumatised and confused adolescents coming through the hospital wards and the emergency department saying that they're trans and undergoing gender treatments. And then in about 2021 I became aware of the lack of evidence underpinning the affirmation model, and I naively thought that my bosses would be open to hearing about my concerns. I started to get in trouble with the hospital executive in last year because I said that I didn't want to immediately use the preferred pronouns of children and adolescents. And that was because I was noticing that we were all pretending that the child had changed sex, and the gender dysphoria was never a focus of treatment. So that led to a series of difficult meetings with my bosses, and they broadened the issue to include whether I would agree to refer kids to the gender clinic, which they said was a workplace requirement. But in terms of alarm bells, they really rang last year. The hospital team that I was working in, we received an education session, and it was run by one of the nurses from the gender clinic, and the topic of the education session was on chest binding. And so what she said was that the gender clinic was running education sessions on chest binding for all the school-based youth health nurses, which are situated in all the public schools in Queensland. And she also said that the hospital was running chest binder fitting sessions, and she said that they were the most fun and enjoyable part of her job. And so at that stage I knew that chest binders destroy the breast architecture, and so girls can end up with breasts that are flat like a grandma's, and so that can reinforce a pathway towards double mastectomy.
And how young would these girls be who would be the target of this chest binding sessions, whether it's at schools or at the hospital?
Oh, well, it just is when their individual development means that they have breasts that they are feeling.
So it can be girls as young as 11 and 12, as long as they have started developing breasts. That's when they start binding.
Yes, and so I was really worried that my hospital was colluding with the disgust that some girls feel towards their bodies in adolescence. And then I was really distressed because she said that chest binders are expensive, and so after a girl has had her top surgery, the double mastectomy, she will often donate her binder to a local NGO, and that will be given to another girl to use. And so after I heard that, I really felt that my hospital had lost its way.
Well, how young are we seeing something like a double mastectomy happen in this country? Because I know there have been doctors at the forefront who have wanted to lower the age of when these procedures can happen. From what you know, are we having teenagers, perhaps 18, 19-year-olds, having double mastectomies in this country?
In the private sector in Queensland, girls as young as 15 are having double mastectomies.
Wow, that is just so disturbing. What about the use of puberty blockers? Because we keep hearing from some advocates that it's completely reversible, there are no side effects. What's your experience of puberty blockers? Are there risks, medical risks associated with their use?
Well, I've seen the downside of puberty blockers. I've seen the kids that deteriorate in their mental state with mood swings and becoming suicidal, and some kids gain a lot of weight on puberty blockers. a big problem with puberty blockers is that they stop the child recovering from the gender dysphoria. And so almost all of the kids that get prescribed puberty blockers go on to take cross-sex hormones. And then if you start puberty blockers at the start of puberty, as they're recommended to be started, and go on to take cross-sex hormones, as kids invariably do, then the ovaries and all the testes and the genital tissues don't develop. And so the child will be permanently infertile and they will have impairment in their capacity for sexual pleasure. And it's suspected that puberty blockers have an impact on cognition because adolescence is such an important time for brain development. But in terms of reversibility, it's hard to know because so few children come off puberty blockers.
Yeah.
But what the Tavistock Gender Identity Development Service in the UK found was that if a child's been on puberty blockers for a number of years and then comes off, it isn't quite so easy for the body to just restart puberty once that adolescent window has closed.
It's just incredible that you would have in a country like Australia, first world country, 15-year-olds having their healthy breasts removed. That to me is astonishing. I think 20 years they're going to look back at us now and go, what were they thinking? How could they have possibly allowed this to happen? Dr. Gillian Spencer, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thanks for having me, Rita.